So really for me, the chicken train is a day range system. The chickens are in there during the day. You can hear them in the background. They're not in there at night. At night, they're in their coop or in this main run, which is behind me. These are more permanent structures. Obviously, this chicken train is mobile. So my predator protection design around this whole chicken train system, it's not that critical. I'm really only protecting from hawks because the chickens are only in there during the day, and my only daytime predators are hawks. So I need aerial protection, and the sides are really just to keep the chickens in. It's not necessarily to keep the predators out. So what happens when I go on vacation or I go on a trip? Well, typically what I'll do is I'll just shut down this run system. Now I'm just starting to use the chicken train, but before with the permanent runs, whenever I left for either a few days or a longer period of time, I would just not allow the chickens into the runs because I didn't want whoever was substituting for me to have to take care of the runs and deal with that worry. And also I knew these runs weren't as secure as the permanent coop and fencing behind me, so I just keep them out of there. How do I do that? Well, this is the tunnel that connects the main run over to the chicken train. It's just a simple engineered piece of technology that I fabbed up one day from the scrap pile. It's just a board, that's it. All I do is I take this board, I block off the tunnel on one end, the chickens can't go in, so that keeps them out of the chicken train, it keeps them in the more permanent run, and then when I'm back, just like I showed you now, for example, I just pull that out, let them back into the run system. So that's why this chicken train isn't designed to be bulletproof. It's not a bulletproof solution because I really don't have a lot of bullets going at it that it needs to be bulletproof for. So this is one area that people have asked about in the comments. What is holding these two sections together? And the answer is gravity. There's nothing holding them together other than gravity. They're just placed end to end. Is that a worry for me? No, it's not. Because the chickens aren't gonna push this out. They're not strong enough to get in there. It's a tight opening already. They'd have to get their head through and just bull through. They don't have the escape instinct of a pig or a goat. They're not trying to get out constantly. I think they're like being in this system. If they dig a hole and inadvertently pop under the rail of here, that's one thing, but they're not looking to exploit I just got pecked. And they're not looking to exploit opportunity to get out. So them pushing through here isn't an issue. And really after a few days of that setting there, by the time the chickens turn up some soil, it kind of cements the train in place, if you will. Like, this is hard to slide. Their little bodies, their little feet, they're not gonna push through that. People have said, well, what about predators? Can they come through and get in there? Potentially they could, but again, I don't have that problem in this system. It's a day range system for me. They're not out here 24/7, so I don't have to worry about that. If you worried about that, sure, I'd connect these sections. People have mentioned Velcro straps is a good example. They're cheap. I like the idea of that. You can pop them on, pop them off. It might be kind of cumbersome to thread it through. It takes a little time. The other thing, maybe just a spring clamp on there would help hold these together, you know, or just a piece of wire, you know, baling wire, wrap it through, twist it up. So if you're really worried about these sections being pushed apart by something from the outside trying to get in, then I would do that. You know, also if you had a heavy predator issue, you may want a more heavy duty structure that sits more firmly on the surface. Again, not my context, not really the issue I have, but I get the point there. So for me, this gap, it's not an issue. So this is my permanent run system. This has been in place since day one. This is where the chickens stayed long before I had this whole concept of day ranging them in these temporary, rotationally grazed runs. This is permanent, never moves. The chickens have access to this 24/7, 365. Well, I guess technically they don't at night when they're up in roost and I shut the coop, but anytime during the day they always have access to this. The downside of that is that area gets trashed. And I'm looking for actually a solution to fix that, and I'll talk about that in another video because it's not just as easy as putting mulch in there because this area is sloped. But this provides the area of what I would call almost bulletproof protection. I'm not really worried about my main predators getting into this run. The real areas of worry where they could get in are from access points where they go into these day range systems. So essentially through the gates I have here, that's where an animal could get in. The area where I'm sitting is inside a big perimeter fence. I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm really in a protected area to start with. So the chicken train system, all my chicken system, is really a system within a greater system. The moat around the village, if you will, is a permanent perimeter fence. So all this is inside that permanent perimeter fence. So that's another reason I don't need the securest protection in here, because odds of a coyote getting into this area where I'm sitting are pretty low. They'd have to jump a pretty high fence or dig under it, which they just don't seem to do. I've never seen any signs of them aggressively digging. Not saying it's not possible, but I haven't seen it. So this run is permanent. It's welded wire. It's 4 feet high. I've buried it in the ground on this side, mostly to protect the chickens. On the other side of this is my perimeter fence. That's another form of welded wire. That's 4 feet high, and that's 1 inch by ½ inch spacing. Really tight gap, so the chickens can't get their head through. Nothing can get a paw through. This is bigger. This is like 2 by 4 inch welded wire. So this is the permanent run. I'll call this almost bulletproof. The chicken train system, I worry about it, like if they had to stay in there at night, that's why I seal them off from it. It's not totally bulletproof. I feel like it's pretty secure given my situation here, but it's more vulnerable than this. This is good. So if I go out of town, I leave them in here. They have access to their coop, and then I seal off this tunnel here leading to the chicken train, and that's how they stay safe. So this is my permanent fence. I know it might be hard to see in the video. Here's my hand on top of it. It's 4 feet high. It's recessed in the ground a little ways. It covers the whole perimeter of my garden area in this section of the property. It's a really tight mesh welded wire fence. It's ½ inch by 1 inch high. You could probably barely fit 2 M&Ms stacked end to end through the gap. It's a really tight mesh. The reason I wanted that is I didn't want anything coming through it. I didn't want ground squirrels going through it, rabbits, gophers, snakes, coyotes, raccoon paws, skunk paws, anything like that getting through. So I spent the money and got this fence. I had to special order it from a fencing company down here. It wasn't the cheapest, but it's probably been one of the best decisions I've made, because initially when I moved in, my biggest issue was one of the neighbors' dogs coming over all the time and getting in here, taking craps, just tearing up stuff. I didn't like it, so this has kept the dog out. That dog has since gone on to dog heaven, so that's really not a worry. And I don't have wild dogs in my area like other people do, so that's not a huge worry. But nonetheless, the main thing this protects this area from, it protects the plants from rabbits, which I don't want in here. It slows down the ground squirrels. They love to just go over it anyway, but that's okay because it makes controlling them a little easier, if you know what I'm saying. And it keeps coyotes out, which is the main thing I really want to keep out. This was one of the big kind of base principles of what I was going for. I wanted to get a solid established perimeter fence in when I started working on this area of the property, because it just relaxes a lot of my worry about many things. Veg getting eaten, predators getting in. Knowing that this is here is just one added layer of security that I don't have to worry about. It's galvanized fencing. As dry as it is here in California, this fence is gonna be here forever. So wise investment for me. I'm glad I did it. But perimeter fencing, this is my main defense. Everything else inside of here, the chicken trains, the runs, are all within this perimeter fence. So this is the outer layer of protection. So when it comes to protecting the chickens, this is the most bulletproof structure I have right here. This is the main coop. This little detached run, the underside of the coop, and then the coop itself. This is the most secure area. So if I was gonna go out of town for 3 or 4 days, I know I can leave the chickens in this space. If I seal it off, they'll be fine. Nothing's getting in here because the fence is buried deeply on all sides. There's a seal, I can seal off the main gateways. There's no small cracks. There's no easy pry points for a raccoon to try and get in here. This is bulletproof. Now, I don't lock them in here very often unless I said I'm going out of town for 3 or 4 days and I can't find anybody to watch the chickens. Then I'll keep them in here. I don't love doing it because it's a small space. I don't like the idea of animals not being able to run at full speed in their enclosure. I think that's how I kind of view sizing an enclosure the right way. If an animal can run its full speed in that enclosure, it's big enough. It gives them room to run. And in here, it's too short. They can't do it. So I don't like keeping them in here, but I will if I have to. It's just one of the things that comes along with having chickens. Sometimes you got to go out of town. Now, the coop itself, this is the most secure thing, so that's where they go every night. So why I don't worry about any night predators whatsoever in any of this system where they're in the day is because they're in here at night. The way I shut them in, it's pretty simple. They just go up a ramp. There's a guillotine style gate here for them. That's what keeps them in at night. Every night, it's either usually me or my wife. We come out, we shut the gate, the chickens are in there. I can sleep very soundly knowing that nothing's getting in. It's raised off the ground. All the doors are well sealed at that point. No raccoons are getting in, or skunks. Raccoons and skunks are my main worries for night predators. Coyotes as well, but to a lesser extent. Raccoons are the big issue. And my very first coop that was sitting here, which was kind of pathetic, it was a temporary coop. The first night the chickens were in this temporary coop, I lost one to what I think is a skunk, maybe a raccoon, because it was one of those gruesome kills that raccoons do where they just eat the head and they leave the rest. So sad story. That's what kind of motivated me to build this system really strong. And since I've had this system, I haven't lost any chickens in it. All the times I've been away, having neighbors watch out for the chickens or leaving them in these systems for periods of time while I was away and the systems were sealed off at various points, it's all worked well. I've probably gotten lucky along the way. I fully accept that. But I've also tried to think, okay, what are all the weak points here? And really what I need to protect myself most from are the raccoons and skunks. They're the big worries because the perimeter fence keeps the coyote out. Now, what the perimeter fence won't do is allow skunks and raccoons from climbing over the fence, so they become really my highest order predator worry here because they can get inside. The coyotes can't get inside. They're not getting in from the outside, so I'm not so worried about that. I've actually had, in the mornings, the coyotes over at that gate, or not the gate, the fence on the other side here where you can see those plants along that driveway, and the chickens have been out here. Now they get freaked out, but the coyote can't get in. It just rams its head against the fence. The chickens, go on high alert, but it can't get in. So the system has actually been tested in reality, and it works. If you're gonna have chickens, think about your area, your situation, urban, rural, suburban. What are your main predators? When are the chickens in these areas? That'll help determine when you need to protect from these predators. Like I said, most of my predators come at night, and that's when the chickens are in the bulletproof solution, so I don't have to worry about that. So you gotta think about this. And the other big critical factors to think about, what are you gonna do when you're out of town? That's something nobody talks about when it comes to getting chickens. They're a 365-day-a-year job, if you will. What are you gonna do when you leave them? How are they gonna get food? Where are you gonna have them go at night? What are they gonna do during the day? How are you gonna make them safe? You gotta think about that ahead of time, and it's gonna be different for everybody's situation. This is how I've handled it for mine. Chicken protection, so far so good. So that's how I keep my chickens safe. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.